thank you very much. I think we need to bring the discussion home because the essence of us going back to history, discussing Russia, discussing Germany, is actually to draw proper lesson and to see how we relate it to our concrete situation wherever you are. So as we are in Nigeria of today, there have been renewed nationalist agitation here and there. A few years ago, we had Biafra. In fact, the agitation for Biafra is still ongoing. We have the Oodua Republic. The Yorubas also want to break away from Nigeria. They want to establish Oodua Republic. You have the Biafra. They want to establish Biafra. And within all this, we have also seen some left saying that the slogan of right to self-determination is also applicable. That if Oodua Republic decides to go, then they have their right. The left should support, that agitation. The Biafra, if they want to go, we should also support their right, to self-determination. So concretely speaking, what does it mean, for masses in Nigeria? How do we approach all this nationalist agitation? Does the right to self-determination, up to the point of secession, is it also relevant to our concrete reality, concrete condition, concrete situation in Nigeria of today as we speak? I need you to shed more light on that, comrade.
All right. I think the primary essence of this discussion is to be able to talk to the youth and the working class of this country, who unfortunately are daily being misled by different agitations, along this ethnic and sometimes religious misdirection. One of the key things that we need to first underline before you throw the slogan of right of self-determination up to the point of secession is to first recognize the existence of the oppressed nation and the oppressor nation. Because if the guiding principle is to achieve the unity of the working class across all nationality, it means the working class and youth of the oppressor nation, you need to appeal to them, so we will naturally have sympathy for the youth and the working class of the oppressed nations. And therefore, at the end of the day, you can as well achieve the unity of these two nationalities, and then you form a federation on socialist basis, which was the case in Russia, as we have rightly looked at. Therefore, in the case of Nigeria, we need to first identify which nation is oppressed, which nation is oppressor nation. This is a very important question in the case of Nigeria. Even some of these shamelessly, some of these Marxists who call themselves Marxists, they are not confident to tell you clearly when you ask them direct question that which nation is oppressing which nation. You don't get any direct answer from this when you throw this question before them, because in the case of Nigeria, it's not as clear. You have three major ethnic groups: the Hausas, the Yorubas, and the Igbos. You now have over 300, almost 300 other smaller ethnic groups that surround them. If there's any form of oppression, it's actually these three who always, at every point in time, oppress this smaller nation, because this system of capitalism cannot do without exploitation. Any means they have, they make sure they exploit it. They use it to exploit others who do not have those means. So we have seen cases whereby bigger nationality will naturally make attempts to subdue the one that are smaller, and we can see it. These three ethnic groups collectively oppress these other three, but the cry of oppression actually comes from these three big nationalities. And that's why we first look at what are the agitations about. When it was time of Yorubas, during the OPC time, they claim it was Hausa Fulani who are the oppressors and they, the oppressed, and therefore they want to secede. This is also being carried on by Igboho of this world and other words. In the Southeast, they said it's the North that are oppressing. But is this a fact? I think that is the most important question that we need to throw to ourselves. If it's a fact, then this right, putting it in the forefront can be easily won. But they've been putting it in the forefront even before the independence of 1960. It had never successfully won any significant support from the rank and file of working class and youth of the North. Because this accusation or this claim has never touched their consciousness, because it's not true, it's not reality that they actually the oppressed nation in Nigeria. Take, for example, even before during the independence, pre-independence, the first set of the people who worked for the colonial masters because of their earlier exposure to Western education, Western civilization, are the Southerners. When the annexation of the northern region took place by the colonial masters, and they had to go with the clerical officers, those who work in banks, those who work, when they finally had railway, they moved significant number of people from the south to the north. The Northerners actually saw the oppression during the colonial period as oppression, not just of the Western imperialists, but also the oppression by the Southerners, who were actually the agents of the colonial masters of that period. They were the one who had access to real money. They were the one who had access to what can be considered the Western civilization, which was a bigger civilization ahead of the civilization predominant in the North at that period. And that's why, even when they raised the question of the, around 1953, when they raised the question of the independence of the country, the resistance came, the objection to this position came from the North, not with the mind of just sabotaging that independence, but they actually thought, which was correct feeling, that a free, liberated Nigeria in the hand of both the North and the South, we actually mean domination of the North by the Southerners because of their exposure, because of their stronger civilized Western civilization that they've been able to have much more contact with. With this, they actually resisted. They voted against the independence for 1957, when the Southerners were actually seriously agitating for that independence. Therefore, the Northern elites have been holding down their own workers and youths on the basis of the fact that they are defending them from being oppressed by the Southerners, that the Southerners are far gone ahead, and the only way they can catch up and be able to resist that domination is by them using their population. Therefore, the consciousness is not the consciousness of oppressing the Southerners. It's actually the consciousness of defending themselves against the oppression, possible oppression by the Southerners. And as I said, this system, had it been the Northerners do not have that population, it's very, very likely, as the politics of that period also showed, that they will have been marginalized, they will have been overrun by Western civilization and serious domination, all what we consider as civil society, civil job, clerical jobs will have been completely dominated by the Southerners. Maybe a figure will shed a little bit more light on this, the gap that actually existed within this period. In 1960, this is during our independence, this year of our independence, the primary school enrollment in the North was only 282,849 pupils. Meanwhile, in the North, in the South, we have 2,000,000 629,770. This is about 90.1% of the enrollment, national enrollment for the primary school. And you can see that gap, that's actually in existence. Therefore, the Northern Elites mobilized the forces below them with the slogan of "Let us defend ourselves against the encroachment of the Southerners." The 1955 Northernization policy even went as far as saying that all positions should be shared by the Northerners, because at a point in time around 1954-55, about 77% of the job that are considered a clerical job, salary earning job, were in the hand of the Southerners. But the effect of the Northernization policy of 1955-56, that was even an attempt to cut significant number of jobs for these Northerners. When they carried it out, rather than saving them, it actually led to the emergence of a bigger informal business, especially in Kano and Kaduna. That was when the Sabon Gari market started developing. And at a point in time, it overran the market of the Northerners themselves and became one of the most dominant in terms of the number of traders, in terms of turnovers, in terms of everything, and all indices that you can use to describe the size of a functioning market. They dominated the Northerners, even within that informal sector, when the room for the formal sector was blocked as a result of Northernization policy. The reason why I'm going to the detail of this is that for as long as the cry you are putting across of oppression of the Southerner by the Northerners, for as long as it doesn't coincide with what the Northerners, the youths, and the workers of the North are feeling day and night, there's no way you can win their sympathy. Therefore, each time you throw this slogan, what you have done is that you are going to get the hearing of few supporters of Igboho and Kanu, who are just extremely few, but you are losing the hearing of thousands, of hundreds of thousands of youths in the North, because it doesn't tally. Don't forget, Comrade Rishi, that the North also has over 83% of the poor people in Nigeria are actually located in the North. If you say Nigeria is the poverty center of the world, North actually represents the poverty center of Nigeria, and therefore it's the real poverty center of the world. And now do you now want to, at the same time, want those ones to agree with you with a slogan that the reason why you are calling for a secession of your own country to be independent is simply because you feel that they are the one oppressing you. And that's why even the time of Awolowo, the time of all those who have led the politics in the past, they've not successfully built any pan-Nigeria party of their so-called progressive that cut across all forms of nationality. It's only the conservative wing of the elites that have been able to do so, because those ones that recognize the fact that it's only through sharing federal character, all form of giving room for the so-called Northern elites to be able to have their own say because of their population, which is relatively strong, you can't overrun. It's only them, this conservative wing, that have been able to build pan-Nigerian party. But the other wing have always been trying. But the more they place their slogan and their policy down, the more it becomes regional, the more it becomes ethnic, the more it becomes sectional. Simply because their slogan they always advance has never been able to cut across all these complications. As I said, in the case of this, in the case of Nigeria, the complications go beyond always throwing in the forefront the question of the right of self-determination. Anytime you throw it out, it always have to be followed by the question of which one is oppressed nation, which one is oppressor nation. Before a man will say, I have to enjoy the right of divorce, it means there's already a major crisis, a crisis of I can't any longer reconcile with this difficulty. But the Nigerian ruling elites, every now and then, across all these three major ethnic groups, have also been saying it loud and clear that they actually united at the top. When you ask them, we need to sit down and agree on how we want to live. I asked them, in the National Assembly, you have the Yorubas, you have the Igbo, you have the Northerners. Why can't they sit down, agree on how they want to live? But they've sat down, they've all agreed on how they want to live. In all questions, they always, sometimes even have unanimous position on this. The ruling elite of Nigeria are very clear about where they are going. The real tension always comes from the petit bourgeois, who sometimes get completely frustrated about their condition. And they have no answer to the terrible condition that the ruling elite in Nigeria has actually submerged them. And the only way they feel they can solve the problem they face daily is only through this decision and campaign for this ethnic cleansing. And that's why the working class in Nigeria too has always been very vocal on this question. But unfortunately, the leadership of the working class has left this room for the charlatans, for all sorts of human beings who lack all the basic common intellectual strength to dissect what exactly is the real problem within the country. They've left the room for them. And don't forget, nature abhors vacuum. For as long as the working class leadership had left that base, inevitably we see Igboho, we see Kanu, and several other human beings who had come in the past, who are presently in now, who will also come in the future. And it's only on the basis of this that you can understand that we have to be very firm and insistent that it's easier for the working class of all ethnic groups to come together and overthrow the collective ruling elite of these collective ethnic groups. It's only on the basis of that unity that we can succeed in freeing ourselves. Anyone would think that by separating first and then solving the problem, the person has not in any way understood the position of Nigerian ruling elite, which is unity and divide them at below for them to continue to oppress. If there's anything they learn from their imperial masters, is the policy of divide and rule. Divide and rule worked during the colonial period. It's still working now. Nigerian ruling elite have mastered it. They are extremely united at the top, but they do everything to make sure that people like Igboho still continue to be used when they need to use them. And when they need to keep them, they know how to keep them. And that's exactly what we have currently.